Thanks, Mark, for visiting us in Montreal at the ShareGate office. It's always fun to have you here and talk Office 365 and even more.
It's always fun to do it. I wish I could visit more often. Montreal is not very far from Boston, but somehow it's far enough that we can't see each other often enough.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about things are changing, obviously. I think you came to speak at the user group about going from classic to modern. There's tons of questions going on. You've known and played with ShareGate Desktop for quite a amount of time, doing migrations. I know that you've used it in other scenarios as well. So really, as we see the landscape changing, if I could say it like that, we've seen migrations going to on-prem, going to Office 365. We're talking a lot about reorganizing, restructuring, modernizing, and ShareGate Desktop is still, I think, a very good fit for that. I don't know, what do you think?
Do I need to say that I'm a big fan of ShareGate Desktop? I mean, I think I've made that more than clear to most people, but it's not an artificial fandom. You know, I actually find that the ShareGate Desktop platform, application is useful on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I actually do fire it up, if not every day, every other day, or every 3 days, to accomplish something within SharePoint for my clients, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. And it's just an incredibly useful tool for doing all kinds of things.
I'm curious, actually, what are, like, say, top 3 things or use cases that you've used it that's not necessarily migration?
Sure. I mean, yeah, the obvious one is migration. You're moving content from one place to another. Traditionally, migration has meant from one version of SharePoint to another. But I use it all the time to move content around, maybe between libraries, maybe to reorganize things, maybe to split a library from one library into 2 because suddenly the content that's in there doesn't really make sense to be contained in one place. As we're going from classic to modern, usually we're reorganizing content. So it's a migration, but it's not sort of this heavy-duty capital M migration that people think of. I also use it all the time to augment metadata on on lists and libraries where it just hasn't been there before. You know, when I start working with new clients, I find a lot of, especially document libraries, where there's title and name. Everything is a document.
Always.
And that is just not as useful as having some metadata on that content. So very often I'll do I keep saying classic today, it's on my mind. I do the standard export to Excel, all the metadata for each of the documents or list items, and then make the changes in Excel, which is often a lot easier. It's easier to sort of drag data down a row and sort of do some formulas and things like that might help tag things, and then import that data back into the list or library. It's great because it doesn't touch the modified or modified by information, because I'm not actually, I don't own that content. Having me touch it really is not very helpful. So that's a great tool.
And I think it's good adding metadata in the sense that, you know, a lot of things in SharePoint depend on having the right content types, having the right metadata. So that could be for applying retention policies. Your content types could have, other things that you have integrated workflows.
Sure.
So being able to, in bulk, apply the right metadata, but keep the integrity of the document is definitely, I think, a big use case that we're seeing our customers as well.
And so, you know, that's a great example of something where I've said ShareGate is not just a migration tool; it's a day-to-day tending the garden tool. You know, I use it to make sure that the content is still alive and useful, and sometimes we have to morph that content for that to happen. The reporting tools are also really helpful. Lots of times we don't, for instance, we know we're running up against a quota in storage. In a bigger company, that tends to be something that happens every once in a while. We don't really know where the content is that's the problem. So we might use a report in ShareGate to say, well, show me the relative sizes of all of the folders in this document library, so I can at least know where to look. There's just a lot of capability in there that I find myself using on a regular basis.
And thanks again for coming, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Thrilled to have you here.